The hall shimmered like a cathedral made of light. Crystal chandeliers glowed above a sea of tuxedos and sequined gowns, laughter and violins swirling in the air. The charity gala at the Rosemont Hotel was the event of the year, a place where wealth disguised itself as virtue. Elena Marin stood near the edge of the ballroom, her hands clasped around a glass of sparkling water. She was 6 months pregnant, the soft curve beneath her silk dress noticeable only when the light hit just right. Her husband, Victor Reyes, the man the entire city admired, moved through the crowd like a conductor among his orchestra, polished, magnetic, untouchable. He was talking to investors, journalists, senators, the kind of people who believed the world spun a little smoother when Victor Reyes smiled. Elena watched him from a distance. Her chest tightened when she saw his hand linger too long on the arm of Vanessa Moore, his business associate. Vanessa laughed softly, her lips brushing the rim of her champagne glass. For a moment, Elena thought of leaving early. The noise pressed against her ribs, the music too bright, the perfume too thick. But Victor caught her gaze from across the room and motioned for her to stay. She smiled faintly and nodded. A waiter brushed past her, nearly spilling wine onto her dress. The glass trembled in her hand. She murmured a quiet apology to no one and set the drink down. That was when Victor appeared beside her, his voice sharp beneath his practiced charm. "What are you doing?" She flinched. "Just waiting. It's loud." "Don't make a scene," he said through his teeth, still smiling for the cameras nearby. "I'm not." His hand brushed her arm, almost tender at first, but his grip tightened. "You embarrassed me last week at the board dinner. Do you remember that?" She looked down. "You said it was fine." "I lied," he said flatly, his smile unwavering. "You talk too much. You make people uncomfortable." A photographer called his name, and Victor lifted his arm, waving casually to the crowd. His fingers dug into her skin as if nothing had changed. The music swelled again, strings and horns rising like a tidal wave. Elena tried to step back, but her heel caught on the edge of the marble step. Her glass fell, shattering against the floor. The crimson liquid spread across the white stone like a wound. The sound was small, a single crack in the symphony, but it was enough. Victor froze. The room hushed for a fraction of a second, a collective intake of breath. He turned toward her, his jaw tightening. "Pick it up," he said softly. "Victor, Pick it up." People were watching. The chandelier light reflected off his cufflinks like tiny suns. "I'll have someone clean it," she whispered. His hand moved so fast that at first she didn't understand what had happened. The slap echoed beneath the chandelier. The music stopped. Every head turned. The world became a painting, still, suspended, silent. Victor's voice broke through, calm and cruel. "Do you know what respect looks like, Elena? It looks like silence." She staggered back, her cheek stinging, the taste of metal in her mouth. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered her name. Then came the sound that would haunt the city for years, the crack of the whip. No one knew where it had come from at first. A prop, perhaps part of the gala's performance. But Victor held it, a thin leather strap used earlier in a charity demonstration for horse therapy. He swung it once, twice, his face frozen in that same immaculate smile. The crowd didn't move. Cameras flashed, some instinctive, some horrified. Elena's cry sliced through the music like glass through silk. "Victor, stop!" a voice shouted, maybe Vanessa's, maybe someone else's, but he didn't. The first strike cut her shoulder. The second tore her sleeve. The third drew blood, and still no one moved. The chandeliers kept shining. The violinist stood frozen, bow suspended mid-air. Elena collapsed to her knees, her breath shallow, her dress torn open like paper. When the guards finally rushed forward, Victor dropped the strap. His expression was serene, almost bored. "She tripped," he said calmly. "She's fine." The words hung there, absurd and terrible. Elena felt hands around her, voices blurred, the scent of perfume and sweat, but all she could see was the ceiling, the fractured light. Someone was calling for help. Someone else whispered her name over and over. As she drifted out of consciousness, the last thing she saw was Victor shaking hands with the senator, as if nothing had happened. When she opened her eyes, she was in an ambulance. The siren wailed in the distance, and the city lights passed above her like falling stars. "Stay with us, ma'am," a paramedic said. "You're going to be all right." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her hand trembled over her stomach. The baby. She couldn't feel anything. The paramedic pressed a hand on her shoulder. "We're almost there." At the hospital entrance, cameras already waited. Reporters shouted her name. The story had spread like fire through dry leaves. A billionaire, a public scandal, a pregnant woman bleeding on marble floors. Daniel Marin arrived moments later. His car stopped in front of the emergency bay, the door flung open before the engine cooled. He pushed through the crowd, his face pale, his hands shaking. When he saw his daughter on the stretcher, his voice cracked. "Elena." The doctor held him back. "Sir, we're taking her to surgery, please." Daniel's throat tightened. "Is the baby?" "We don't know yet." The doors closed, leaving him in the white corridor, surrounded by flashes of light from outside. For the first time in years, the man everyone feared, the tycoon who could crush empires, looked small. He turned toward the glass window, his reflection fractured by the ambulance lights. Behind him, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Marin, is it true your son-in-law assaulted your daughter?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Inside the operating room, Elena's heart monitor beeped steadily, each tone a fragile thread holding her to life. Hours later, Daniel sat alone in the waiting room, his coat folded neatly on the chair beside him. The hospital clock ticked without mercy. He replayed the night in his head, the ballroom, the laughter, the phone call that had shattered his world. For years he had told himself that Elena was safe with Victor, that wealth meant protection, that a man who owned half the skyline couldn't be a monster. Now he knew better. A nurse stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Marin?" He stood quickly. "She's stable," the nurse said. "We managed to stop the bleeding. The baby's alive." He exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a cry. "Can I see her?" "Soon," the nurse replied gently. "She's resting." Daniel nodded, then looked out the window at the horizon where dawn was breaking. The city looked different now, quieter, crueler. He pulled out his phone. There were already hundreds of messages, headlines, videos. The clip of Victor's hand raised in the air had gone viral. He stared at the screen until his eyes burned. Then he called his attorney. When the man answered, Daniel's voice was calm, stripped of warmth. "I want everything you can find on Victor Reyes. Every deal, every signature, every person he's ever paid." "Sir, it's 4 a.m. "Then wake them up," Daniel said. "He hurt my daughter." The line went silent. Daniel ended the call and leaned back in the chair. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city began to stir, unaware that something had just shifted, a fault line opening beneath the glittering towers. He looked once more toward the door of the operating room. "You'll never touch her again," he whispered. Outside, the first flash of sunlight hit the hospital windows, bright, blinding, almost holy. The night of power and silence was over, and the war had just begun. Morning light crept through the hospital blinds like the slow unveiling of truth. Machines hummed quietly beside the bed, and Elena lay motionless, her face pale against the white sheets. Her father sat in the corner, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on her breathing. Daniel Marin had built empires from glass and steel, but now he found himself powerless before the fragile rhythm of his daughter's heart. Every beep of the monitor was a reminder that money couldn't mend flesh or erase fear. A soft knock came at the door. A nurse stepped in, carrying a chart. "She's stable," she said quietly, "but the trauma was severe. We need to monitor both of them closely." Daniel's voice was low. "Will she wake up?" "Soon. The body has limits, Mr. Marin, but she's strong." When the nurse left, silence filled the room again, the kind that pressed against the ribs. Daniel rose and walked to the window. Outside, reporters still swarmed near the entrance, cameras waiting for a statement. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. He remembered Elena as a little girl, dancing barefoot in the garden, her laughter echoing against the stone walls of their home. He had promised her then that no one would ever hurt her, and yet here she was, broken because he had believed in a man's polished smile. Behind him, a whisper broke the stillness. "Dad." He turned. Her eyes were open, small, tired, but awake. He crossed the room in seconds, taking her hand. "Elena." Her lips trembled. "The baby?" "He's all right," Daniel said. "You both are." Tears slid down her cheeks, silent at first, then trembling sobs that made her shoulders shake. Daniel leaned forward, his forehead against her hand. "It's over," he said softly. She shook her head. "No. He'll come back. He always does." Daniel straightened, his jaw tightening. "He won't touch you again." She turned her face toward the wall. "He said no one would believe me. He said he owned them all, the judges, the press, the police." Daniel's voice hardened. "He doesn't own me." She looked at him, her eyes dark with disbelief. "He'll ruin you." "He already did," he said, "the moment he laid a hand on you." For a moment neither spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the machines. Elena's breathing slowed. "I thought I could fix him, that if I stayed quiet, if I did everything right, he'd stop." Daniel's voice was heavy. "Monsters don't stop when you're quiet. They stop when someone louder stands up." She closed her eyes, exhausted. He sat beside her for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her chest. When her breathing steadied, he rose and stepped out into the hallway. His assistant, a man named Graham, was waiting with a tablet in his hands. "Sir, the footage is everywhere," Graham said. "The media has it on every channel. They're calling it the ballroom incident. Public outrage is—" Daniel interrupted him. "I don't care what they're calling it. I want every lawyer, every investigator, every contact we have ready to move. Find witnesses, get statements. This won't vanish into headlines." Graham hesitated. "Victor's team is already controlling the narrative. They're saying she slipped, that she's unstable." Daniel's tone turned cold. "Do they have video of her slipping?" "No, sir." "Then find me every camera in that ballroom. There were over 100 phones, news crews, security feeds. I want every angle." "Yes, sir." Daniel turned toward the window overlooking the city. The skyline glowed in the distance, the empire Victor Reyes had helped build, now a monument waiting to collapse. He said quietly, almost to himself, "He thinks this is about reputation. It isn't. It's about my daughter." Later that afternoon, Elena woke again to find her father sitting by the bed. Sunlight spilled across the floor. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. "Do you remember when you used to take me to the lake?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "You'd always bring that red kite. You said it could fly higher if you didn't hold it too tight." She smiled faintly. "You told me that. I think I forgot." He looked at her. "You didn't forget. You just trusted the wrong wind." She turned away, tears slipping down her cheek. "Everyone saw, didn't they?" "Yes." Her voice shook. "Then there's nothing left to hide." He hesitated, then said quietly, "There's nothing left to lose either." She studied his face, the lines carved deep around his eyes. "What will you do?" He answered without hesitation. "I'll destroy him." She closed her eyes, whispering, "Don't." He leaned forward. "Why not?" "Because if you go to war with him, he wins again. That's what he wants, for us to drown in hate." Daniel's voice was calm, but the fury underneath it was visible. "I'm not drowning, Elena. I'm building something that will make sure he never breathes freely again." The door opened. A police officer stepped in, removing his hat. "Mr. Marin, Mrs. Reyes." Daniel's eyes hardened at the name. "She's not Mrs. Reyes anymore." The officer nodded awkwardly. "Of course, sir. We just need to ask a few questions about what happened last night." Elena's hand trembled. Daniel noticed and said firmly, "Not now. She's still recovering." "Understood," the officer said. "But there's pressure from the press and the district attorney's office. They'll want her statement soon. Daniel nodded. She'll give it when she's ready. After the officer left, Elena whispered, He'll twist everything. He always does. Daniel sat back. Then we'll twist it back. For the first time, she almost smiled. That evening, Daniel met with his legal team in a private hospital lounge. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and exhaustion. Charts and photographs littered the table. Victor Reyes has enough influence to bury this case before it reaches trial, one lawyer said. But public opinion is against him. If we control the narrative, we can force the prosecutor's hand. Daniel listened silently. Another lawyer spoke. Sir, the footage that surfaced online is grainy. It doesn't show everything. But if we could find someone from the staff, maybe a server or security guard. Find them, Daniel said. Pay them if you have to. I don't care what it costs. Graham leaned forward. We already tracked down a waitress who worked that night. Name's Linda Parker. She says she saw everything. She's scared to talk. Then make her feel safe, Daniel said. She's worried about her job. Then she can work for me. The lawyers exchanged glances. They had seen Elena Marin ruthless in business, but this was different. Personal, deliberate, unstoppable. When the meeting ended, he stood by the window watching the city lights flicker in the dark. His reflection looked older, sharper. He spoke softly, though no one was there to hear it. You hurt her in public, Victor. I'll end you the same way. Back in her room, Elena couldn't sleep. The world outside her window pulsed with sirens and flashes. She turned on the TV. Victor's face filled the screen. Reporters crowded around him as he stepped out of his penthouse. Mr. Reyes, one shouted. What do you say to the allegations that you assaulted your wife? Victor smiled for the cameras. My wife is unwell, he said. She's under stress from her pregnancy. She fell. That's all. Elena stared at the screen, numb. The interviewer pressed, but witnesses claim you... Victor raised a hand. I love my wife, and I'll protect her, even from lies. The words hit her harder than the whip ever had. She turned off the television and whispered into the dark. No, not this time. Her hand rested on her stomach. The baby kicked once, a faint flutter, a reminder that something still lived beyond the ruin. Outside, the city kept humming, unaware that a storm was gathering in silence. And beneath it all, one truth burned steady and cold. Elena Marin had declared war. The third morning after the attack began with the faint hum of rain against the hospital windows. The storm outside had swallowed the city skyline, turning it into a blur of grey. Inside, the fluorescent light was merciless, casting long shadows across the sterile floor. Elena Marin sat upright in her bed, one hand resting on her abdomen. The bruises had started to yellow, but her face still carried the hollow stillness of someone who had seen too much. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, fragile and fierce all at once. The door opened quietly. Daniel entered carrying 2 coffees. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled, eyes red from lack of sleep. You're awake, he said softly. I haven't really slept, she replied. Her voice was calm, almost distant. He handed her a cup. Decaf. The doctor said caffeine isn't good for the baby. She managed a faint smile. You remembered. I remember everything now, he said. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain tapping steadily against the window. Somewhere in the hallway, a nurse's shoes squeaked against the floor. Elena finally spoke. You shouldn't be here all the time. People will talk. Daniel leaned forward. Let them talk. I'm not leaving you alone. She turned the cup in her hand, staring at the ripples. He'll come for me, you know. Victor doesn't lose quietly. Daniel's voice was low but firm. He's already lost. He just hasn't realized it yet. She looked at him, her eyes searching. You sound like you're going to hurt him. He met her gaze. I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. The conversation ended there, hanging between them like smoke. Later that morning, the nurse helped Elena into a wheelchair. A short walk will help with your circulation, the nurse said gently, just a few minutes down the corridor. Elena nodded. Her father joined her, pushing the chair slowly past the white walls lined with framed photos of smiling patients. The scent of antiseptic clung to everything. As they passed the waiting area, whispers followed them. Nurses, visitors, even patients who recognized her face from the news. Phones lifted discreetly to capture her image. Elena lowered her eyes. "They're filming me," she whispered. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheelchair handles. "Ignore them." "How?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. They reached a small garden atrium where rain slid down the glass roof in steady lines. The nurse left them alone. Daniel parked the chair near the fountain, its soft trickle filling the silence. Elena stared at the water. "Do you ever wish we weren't rich?" Daniel looked at her, surprised. "Why would you say that?" "Because when you have everything, people stop seeing you as human," she said. "They see a story, a scandal, a target, not a woman, not a daughter." He sighed. "Maybe you're right." She turned toward him. "You think money can fix this, but it can't. Not the fear, not the shame." He paused before answering. "No, but it can make sure he pays for it." By afternoon, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. A woman in her early 30s carrying a notepad. Her expression was nervous but determined. "Elena," she said softly. "I'm Linda Parker. I worked at the gala." Elena blinked. "You were there?" Linda nodded. "I served your table. I saw what he did." Daniel stepped closer. "Why are you here?" Linda hesitated. "Because no one else will speak up. They're scared. But I have footage. Security cameras loop every 15 minutes. Except I had my phone recording. It's not perfect, but it's something." Daniel's voice sharpened. "You recorded it?" "Yes," she said. "I was hiding behind the floral stand when it started. I didn't mean to. I knew it was wrong." Eleanor's hands trembled. "Can I see it?" Linda hesitated. "Are you sure?" Eleanor nodded. "I need to." Linda pressed play. The small screen flickered, shaky, grainy, chaotic. But the image was unmistakable. Victor's arm raised, the sound of the whip cutting through music, the crowd frozen in horror. Eleanor's cry echoed faintly from the speakers. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. When the video ended, no one spoke. The silence felt like a living thing. Linda finally said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do." Elena looked up, her voice barely audible. "You did the right thing." Daniel turned to Linda. "You'll be protected." "I'll make sure of that." Linda swallowed. "They're already threatening me online. My address leaked this morning." Daniel's tone was steady. "You'll have a place to stay. Safe. Don't go home." Tears filled Linda's eyes. "Thank you." She left quietly, the door closing behind her. Elena whispered, "She's risking everything." Daniel nodded. "So are we." That evening, as rain turned to thunder, Elena lay awake, listening to the storm. The sound reminded her of the whip, sharp, sudden, uncontrollable. Daniel sat beside her bed again, flipping through documents. His phone buzzed constantly with updates, but his focus stayed on her. She spoke softly. "Do you remember when Mom left?" He froze. "Yes. I was 12. You said she couldn't handle the pressure. But I think she just couldn't handle you." He closed the folder. "That's probably true." Eleanor looked at him. "You built everything you wanted. But you lost us in the process." His eyes softened. "I know." She turned her head toward the window. "Victor wasn't the first man to hurt me. You just didn't see it because it didn't leave bruises." Daniel's voice cracked. "Elena, no," she said quietly. "You don't have to apologize. Just be different this time." He nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep. Outside, lightning lit up the sky, casting brief flashes across the room. For a moment, their faces looked ghostly in the reflection. Daniel spoke again, his voice low. "When this is over, I want you to start somewhere new, somewhere far from here." She looked at him, eyes tired but fierce. I'm not running away. He exhaled slowly. You have your mother's stubbornness. And your temper, she replied. That almost made him smile. By midnight, the rain stopped. The air outside was clean, the city washed of its grime for a brief, fragile moment. Elena drifted into sleep. Daniel remained awake, watching her breathe, his mind already building plans, press statements, legal moves, security measures. His phone buzzed again, a message from Graham. We traced a media leak back to Victor's PR team. They're preparing to release a statement claiming Elena's history of emotional instability. Daniel typed back, let them. By tomorrow we'll own every camera angle that proves the truth. He stood, stretching stiff muscles, and walked to the window. The city lights shimmered like broken promises below. Behind him, Elena murmured something in her sleep, words he could barely make out. She said, don't let him win. Daniel turned toward her, his expression unreadable. I won't, he whispered. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the clouds. The storm had passed, but something heavier lingered in the air, the weight of decisions that could no longer be undone. And somewhere across the city, Victor Reyes was waking up too, ready to reclaim the narrative that was slipping through his hands. Neither of them knew that the next 24 hours would decide who the world believed, the man with power or the woman who had found her voice. By the next morning, the city was on fire. Not with flames, but with noise. News vans crowded the hospital gates, their antennas jutting toward the clouds like metallic weeds. Headlines scrolled across every screen. Billionaire scandal, domestic abuse, justice, or hysteria. The world had chosen its newest obsession. Inside the hospital, Elena watched it all unfold through the television mounted on the wall. Her face appeared again and again, blurred, pixelated, framed by words that weren't hers. She muted the sound. Daniel entered the room carrying a folder thick with papers. He looked older than he had a week ago, his jaw set, his eyes darker. They're moving fast, he said. Victor's team filed a restraining order against you. Elena turned from the TV. Against me? They're claiming you're unstable, that you're making threats. She gave a small, bitter laugh. He hit me, and now I'm the danger. Daniel placed the folder on the table. That's how men like him work. They turn every wound into a weapon. Elena leaned back against the pillow. Then what do we do? We fight back, he said. She studied him for a moment. You already have a plan, don't you? He nodded. I've hired a crisis management firm. They'll handle the media, but we also have to build the legal case. Linda's footage isn't enough. We need witnesses. Elena's voice was quiet. Vanessa was there. Daniel frowned. The associate? She saw everything. She's afraid of him, but she knows the truth. He thought for a moment. Can you reach her? Elena hesitated. She blocked my number months ago, but maybe she'll talk to you. Daniel looked at her, then nodded once. I'll find her. That afternoon, in a high-rise office overlooking the river, Vanessa Moore stared at her reflection in the window. Her phone buzzed on the desk. When she saw Daniel Marin's name, her stomach tightened. She answered cautiously. Mr. Marin. Ms. Moore, Daniel said, his tone calm but firm. We need to talk about what happened at the Rosemont. She exhaled slowly. You know I can't. Victor's lawyers already warned me. You saw him attack my daughter, Daniel said. You know what he did. Knowing doesn't mean surviving, she replied quietly. He's dangerous. You have no idea what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of, Daniel said. That's why I'm not backing down. Vanessa walked to the bar and poured herself a drink. You think the law will save her? He owns half the judges in this city. Then I'll buy the other half, Daniel said coldly. There was a pause, the sound of ice clinking against glass. Vanessa spoke again, her voice softer. You're just like him. Daniel didn't answer. She sighed. Look, I don't want to be part of this. If I testify, my career's over. He'll ruin me. Daniel's tone sharpened. He already ruined you. You just haven't accepted it yet. There was silence on the line. Then she said, almost a whisper. "Send someone I trust. I'll give them what I can." Daniel replied, "You'll have my word." He ended the call, his reflection in the window almost indistinguishable from the storm outside. That evening, the hospital's lights dimmed as visiting hours ended. Elena sat awake, unable to sleep. The television remained muted, showing clips of protests outside Victor's headquarters. Some carried signs demanding justice. Others shouted that it was all a smear campaign. A nurse entered quietly to check her IV. "It's getting noisy out there," the nurse said. "Feels like the whole world's watching." Elena murmured, "That's what he wanted, the world watching him." The nurse hesitated. "He won't win, not this time." Elena smiled faintly. "He already has their attention. Now I have to decide what to do with it." When the nurse left, she reached for her phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened the camera app. The lens reflected her tired eyes, her bruised face. She pressed record. "This is for whoever's still listening," she said quietly. "My name is Elena Marin. I've been told to stay silent, to heal, to move on, but silence is what got me here. So if you're watching this, don't look away." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "He wanted me invisible. He thought power could erase pain. But pain doesn't disappear, it echoes." She stopped the recording and saved it without posting. For now, it was only for her. A promise she wasn't ready to break yet. Across town, Victor Reyes stood before a wall of mirrors in his penthouse suite. His publicist, a lean man in a grey suit, adjusted a tie that didn't need adjusting. "Smile softer," the publicist said. "We need sympathy, not dominance." Victor obeyed, the muscles in his jaw twitching. The publicist continued, "Tomorrow you'll hold a press conference. We'll frame this as a misunderstanding, a family matter blown out of proportion. You'll say you love your wife and want privacy for her recovery." Victor's voice was smooth but cold. "And if she speaks?" "Then we discredit her," the man said simply. "We'll release the medical reports about her anxiety treatments. The public will fill in the rest." Victor smiled faintly. "Perfect." He walked toward the window, looking down at the city below. "She thinks she can destroy me with tears and sympathy. But people don't want the truth. They want entertainment." The publicist adjusted his notes. "And you'll give it to them." Victor nodded. "Exactly." The next morning, Daniel arrived at the hospital with a new expression, one Elena hadn't seen before. It wasn't anger anymore. It was precision. He placed a tablet in front of her. "Watch this." On the screen, the news played Victor's press conference. He stood behind a podium, his suit impeccable, his tone measured. Cameras flashed around him. "My wife and I have been under a lot of stress," Victor said to the reporters. "The incident at the Rosemont has been exaggerated. Elena is a wonderful woman, but she's been struggling emotionally. I only ask for privacy as our family heals." Elena's hand clenched. "He's painting me as insane." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but look behind him." She frowned. "What?" He rewound the clip and zoomed in on a figure standing at the edge of the frame, Vanessa Moore. Her face was pale, her arms crossed, eyes darting nervously. "She showed up," Daniel said, "which means she's ready." Elena looked at him. "For what?" "To start the fire." That evening, Daniel met Vanessa in an underground parking lot beneath her office building. Rain echoed in the distance. She wore a trench coat, her face half hidden beneath the collar. "This feels dramatic," she said. "It is," Daniel replied. She handed him a small flash drive. "It's every email, every threat, every payment he made to silence people. Journalists, assistants, models. There's more than just your daughter." Daniel took it carefully. "You're doing the right thing." She gave a bitter laugh. "There's no right thing when you're standing this close to hell." He said, "Then step away from it." She turned toward the elevator. Too late for that. When she was gone, Daniel looked down at the drive in his hand. The city lights shimmered in puddles near his shoes. The storm had returned, soft and relentless. He slipped the drive into his pocket and whispered, "You wanted war, Victor. You'll have it." Back in her room, Elena stared out at the rain. She didn't know about the flash drive yet. She didn't know that the evidence her father now held could burn everything to the ground. All she knew was that for the first time, the fear had started to fade. Something else had taken its place, a spark she didn't recognize. She placed her hand over her stomach. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. She whispered, "We're still here." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The first sparks had caught. By dawn, the storm had drained away, leaving the city washed and gleaming. But beneath its polished skyline, something was shifting. The first wave of leaks hit the news before sunrise. Emails, bank transfers, voice recordings. The story was everywhere. Daniel Marin sat in his office downtown, watching it unfold across 4 monitors. His reflection in the glass behind him looked almost spectral, his face lit by the flicker of breaking news banners. The flash drive from Vanessa Moore sat open on the desk beside a cup of untouched coffee. On one screen, a reporter read out the details. Documents appear to link Victor Reyes to multiple cases of coercion, hush money, and falsified accounts within his own charity foundation. Daniel didn't move. His assistant Graham entered the room carrying a folder. "Has spreading like wildfire," Graham said. 3 networks picked it up already. Social media's tearing him apart. Daniel's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Good." Graham hesitated. "Sir, this might go beyond him. Some of our partners are tied to his companies." Daniel looked up slowly. "Then they'll burn too." Graham nodded, leaving quietly. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen. Victor's empire had been built on image, one perfect photograph at a time. Now those same cameras were devouring him. At the hospital, Elena scrolled through the flood of headlines on her phone. Her heart pounded as she read, "Victor Reyes, accused of corruption and abuse." Photos of him filled every feed, smiling, shaking hands, now turned into evidence of deceit. The door opened. Daniel stepped in. He looked composed, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. She asked, "You did this, didn't you?" He sat beside her. "The truth did this." Her gaze didn't soften. "And what happens when he fights back?" Daniel folded his hands. "Then he loses louder." Elena looked away, her voice trembling. "You make it sound so simple." He said, "It's not simple, but it's necessary." The television on the wall switched automatically to a live broadcast. Victor stood outside his headquarters, surrounded by flashing cameras. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Reyes, how do you respond to these new accusations?" Victor raised his hand, smiling that same controlled smile. "This is a coordinated attack against me," he said, "by people who stand to gain from my downfall." Another reporter yelled, "Is it true your wife's father released the files?" Victor's eyes flickered, but his tone stayed smooth. "Daniel Marin is exploiting a family tragedy for personal revenge. I have nothing to hide." The feed cut to a video montage, clips of Victor and Elena from happier times, charity galas, vacations, magazine covers. Now every image felt tainted. Elena whispered, "He's turning it into theater." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then we'll give him an audience he can't control." Across the city, Vanessa Moore sat in her apartment with the blinds drawn. Her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from unknown numbers, threats, offers, bribes. She poured herself another drink with shaking hands. When she turned on the TV, Victor's face filled the screen again. He spoke with rehearsed sorrow. "I love my wife," he said, "and I hope she finds peace." Vanessa muttered to herself, "Peace isn't what you leave behind, Victor. It's what you take away." A knock sounded on her door. She froze. The knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate raps. "Who is it?" she asked. "It's Graham, Mr. Marin's assistant," a voice answered. She opened the door cautiously. Graham handed her a small envelope. "From Mr. Marin," he said. She opened it. Inside was a single card with the words, "You did the right thing. You're safe." Vanessa looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Am I?" Graham met her eyes. "He keeps his promises." By noon, the financial markets began to react. Victor's companies plummeted. Stockholders panicked. Board members resigned one after another. In his penthouse, Victor watched the red lines fall across the screen. His publicist tried to speak, but Victor's voice cut him off sharply. "Don't tell me to stay calm," he said. "Fix it." The man stammered. "We can't. The evidence is everywhere. Emails, audio, transfers." Victor threw a glass against the wall. "She did this," he said. "She and her father." The publicist stepped back. "Sir, it's not just them. Others are coming forward. Former employees, journalists." Victor turned slowly. "Who?" "Names we don't recognize. People saying you silenced them." Victor's lips curved into a thin smile. "Then it's time they remember who I am." He picked up his phone and made a call. "Get me the judge, the one I helped into office." The publicist whispered, "That won't work anymore." Victor's expression darkened. "Then we'll remind him why it should." That evening, Elena watched another news broadcast. A reporter was standing outside Victor's penthouse. "The once untouchable businessman is now under investigation for multiple charges," the anchor said. "Sources confirm authorities have issued warrants for digital records and financial audits." Elena looked at her father. "It's happening, isn't it?" He nodded. "It's beginning." She exhaled slowly. "So why don't I feel better?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because justice isn't joy, Elena. It's survival." She turned her gaze toward the window, where the last light of day faded behind the buildings. "Survival isn't enough anymore," she said quietly. He studied her face. "What do you want?" "I want my voice back," she said. Daniel hesitated. "Then use it." Later that night, Elena sat in bed with her phone again. The video she had recorded days earlier still sat in her gallery, unseen by anyone. She opened it, watched her own trembling face on the screen. Her voice in the video said, "If you're watching this, don't look away." She pressed post. Within minutes, it spread like lightning. Millions of views, comments pouring in from every corner of the world. Victor's name trended beside hers. Elena Marin Speaks became the symbol of a movement that had no name an hour earlier. Inside his penthouse, Victor saw it on his screen. He laughed, low and humorless. "She wants to fight in public? Fine. Let her drown there." But this time the tide wasn't his. At Daniel's office, Graham rushed in holding his phone. "Sir, it's viral. She posted the video." Daniel stood quickly. "How long ago?" 10 minutes. He exhaled, half in shock, half in pride. "She did it on her own," Graham nodded. "And people are listening." Daniel turned to the window, watching the city lights flicker like embers. "Then it's not just my war anymore," he said. "It's hers too." By midnight, Victor's empire was collapsing in real time. One by one, investors withdrew. The charity board resigned. A warrant for his arrest was issued quietly. But nothing about the night was quiet anymore. Cameras surrounded his building as police sirens echoed in the streets below. Victor stood before his mirror, adjusting his tie one last time. He whispered to his reflection, "They'll forget. They always forget." When the elevator doors opened, the officers were waiting. He smiled at them. "Gentlemen," he said, "shall we?" Outside, flashes erupted like lightning. Across town, Elena sat awake, watching it unfold on live television. Her father sat beside her, silent. The anchor's voice trembled as she spoke. "Victor Reyes has been taken into custody tonight on charges of assault and financial misconduct. This is a developing story." Elena didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Daniel finally said, "It's over." Elena shook her head. "No, it's only over when I can sleep without hearing him." He didn't argue. Outside, the city glowed with the reflection of camera lights, the same light that had once glorified Victor, now recording his fall. The empire had crumbled, not with a roar, but with the quiet strength of a woman who refused to stay silent. And somewhere deep in the night, the world began to listen. The day after Victor's arrest, the city looked different. The sky was bright and sharp, the kind of cold blue that made everything feel cleaner than it really was. But inside the Marin family's world, the air was still heavy, too still, too quiet. Elena sat by the window of her hospital room, a small microphone clipped to her gown. Across from her, a young reporter adjusted the camera, nervous hands fumbling with cables. The room smelled of disinfectant and flowers. "You can start whenever you're ready," the reporter said softly. Elena nodded. "Just keep it simple, no questions, I'll talk." The red light blinked on. She looked straight into the lens. "My name is Elena Marin," she said. "For years I believed silence was safer, that if I stayed quiet I could protect myself and the people I loved. I was wrong. Silence isn't protection. It's permission." She paused, breathing slowly. "What happened to me wasn't an accident. It was control. It was power, disguised as love." Outside the frame, Daniel watched from the corner of the room, his arms folded. He had insisted on the interview. But now, seeing her speak, he realized this wasn't his battle anymore. It was hers. Elena continued, her voice steady. "If you're watching this and you're scared, I know what that feels like. I know how it sounds when someone says you're overreacting. I know how it feels when no one believes you. But you're not alone. Not anymore." The reporter lowered the camera slowly, tears in her eyes. "That was perfect," she whispered. Elena gave a faint smile. It wasn't perfect. It was true. By afternoon, the interview aired. It spread faster than any headline about Victor's downfall. News anchors replayed her words between advertisements, her face appearing on every screen across the country. In the hospital cafeteria, nurses stopped to watch. Taxi drivers left their radios on. Strangers who had never heard her name whispered it like a prayer. At his office, Daniel watched the broadcast in silence. His phone rang non-stop, calls from partners, politicians, foundations offering support. He ignored them all. Graham entered holding a tablet. "It's everywhere, sir," he said. "They're calling it the speech that changed everything." Daniel looked up. "Good. Now make sure it doesn't get buried by tomorrow's scandal." Graham nodded. "Already working on it." When he left, Daniel turned back to the screen. The video ended with Elena saying, "Silence isn't protection, it's prison." He whispered almost to himself, "You found your voice, sweetheart." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Messages flooded her phone, thousands from women she didn't know. Stories, confessions, thank yous. Some messages were angry, others grateful, all of them raw. A nurse entered quietly to check her vitals. "You've started something," the nurse said. "People are listening." Elena looked at the monitor's soft green line. "Then I have to keep going." When the nurse left, she opened a new note on her phone and began to write. It wasn't for the media or the lawyers. It was for the foundation she wanted to build, a place for women who had nowhere else to go. Her fingers moved across the screen as she whispered the words aloud. "Hope isn't born from peace. It's born from pain that refuses to die quietly." Across town, in a dimly lit cell, Victor sat on the edge of his cot. The guards had taken his watch, his ring, even his shoes. For the first time in years, he looked ordinary. A television hung in the corner of the corridor, just loud enough for him to hear his wife's voice echoing through the concrete walls. "This isn't about revenge," she was saying. "It's about truth." Victor stared at the floor. His fingers twitched. "You think you've won," he muttered under his breath. "You have no idea what winning costs." But the sound of her voice filled the silence anyway, steady and clear, drowning his words before they could matter. The next morning, Daniel walked into Elena's room carrying a stack of documents. "They're offering settlements," he said. "Every company tied to Victor wants to donate to your foundation. Some want to attach their names to it." Elena looked at him. "And you think we should take it?" He shrugged. "Money helps." She shook her head. "Not their money. Not the same people who looked away." Daniel frowned. "You'll need funding, Elena." "I'll find it," she said quietly, "but not from guilt." He smiled slightly. "You really are your mother's daughter." She looked up at him. "You mean stubborn?" He nodded. "And right." They shared a silence that felt lighter than the ones before. Later that week, Elena left the hospital for the first time. Cameras lined the entrance, flashing as she stepped into the sunlight. She wore a simple blue dress, the same color she had worn the night of the gala, Reporters shouted her name, but she didn't stop. Daniel walked beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. A reporter called out, "Elena, do you have any message for Victor Reyes?" She turned just once, her voice calm. "I already said everything I needed to." Then she stepped into the car, the door closing behind her. Inside, she leaned her head against the window as the city rolled by. Streets she had once feared to see again. Now every corner looked different, alive. Daniel watched her quietly. "You're sure about this? The press tour, the foundation, the public speaking?" She nodded. "I'm done hiding," he said. "You don't owe anyone anything." She turned to him. "I know. That's why I can finally choose to give something back." He smiled faintly. "You've changed." She looked out at the skyline. "No," she said. "I just stopped pretending." That evening, Elena appeared on live television, her first formal interview since the trial began. The studio lights were bright, the air electric. The host introduced her as the woman who spoke when the world told her to stay silent. When asked what she wanted now, she answered without hesitation, "I want people to understand that what happened to me isn't rare, it's just visible now, and visibility is power." The host asked, "Do you forgive him?" Elena thought for a moment. "Forgiveness is freedom," she said, "but I'm not free yet." The studio fell quiet. She added, "When I am, maybe then." At home that night, Daniel watched the broadcast alone. The sound of her voice filled the room like light. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to exhale. He picked up his phone and typed a message, but deleted it before sending. There was nothing left to say. She was already saying it better than he ever could. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the water. Somewhere a billboard displayed her face above the words, "Out of pain we rise." He whispered to himself, "You did it, Elena." And across millions of screens, her final line echoed again and again, the one she had said with quiet conviction. "Silence isn't protection, it's prison, and I don't live there anymore." The courthouse rose like a monument of glass and stone, its doors flanked by reporters and camera crews. The air outside pulsed with murmurs and flashes, a city holding its breath. Inside, everything smelled of paper, polish, and tension. Elena Marin stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, her hands folded in front of her. Her blue dress was simple again, unadorned, symbolic. Her father adjusted his tie beside her. "You don't have to go through this," Daniel said quietly. "Your statement on record is enough." She shook her head. "If I don't look him in the eye, he'll think I'm still afraid." Daniel exhaled, steady but uneasy. "Then I'll be right here." The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff motioned for them to enter. Inside, the noise died instantly. Dozens of faces turned toward her, the press, the jury, the public, all waiting. Victor sat at the defendant's table in a grey suit, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. The only thing that betrayed him was the tightness in his jaw. When their eyes met, the silence deepened. For years, that look had meant control. Now, it meant nothing. The judge entered. The room rose, then sat again. The prosecutor began with a voice that carried like a blade. "We are here because of what happened at the Rosemont Gala. But this case is not only about one night. It is about a pattern of violence, coercion, and power." He turned toward Elena. "Mrs. Marin, please take the stand." She stood. Her legs trembled for half a second, but she walked forward with calm precision. The sound of her heels on the marble echoed through the room. Once seated, the clerk raised a hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Elena answered. "I do." The prosecutor smiled gently. "Ms. Marin, could you tell the court, in your own words, what happened that night?" She took a breath. "It was supposed to be a charity gala. I remember the light, the music, the smell of champagne, and then the sound stopped." Her voice didn't shake. "He hit me, in front of everyone." The room stayed frozen. Only the sound of pens scratching filled the silence. The prosecutor nodded. "And after that?" He kept hitting me, she said, until someone stopped him. But what stayed with me wasn't the pain. It was the silence. Everyone saw, but no one moved. From the defense table, Victor leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something. His smile returned, a rehearsed smirk that once made headlines. The prosecutor continued, "Did you ever feel safe in your marriage?" "No," she said. "I felt contained, like a possession that had to shine." "And why didn't you leave?" Elena hesitated. "Because when someone convinces you that your fear is love, you stop believing in escape." Her words rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge shifted slightly. The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Marin. No further questions." The defense attorney stood. "Mrs. Marin," he said, "you've become something of a public figure recently, haven't you?" She met his gaze. "I didn't ask to be. Yet you've given interviews, started a foundation, released videos, you've spoken at rallies." "Yes," she said simply. He paced slowly. "Some might say this attention benefits you, that you've built a career from this story." Her voice stayed calm. "If you think surviving abuse is a career, you've never been afraid for your life." A murmur spread through the audience. The judge struck her gavel once. "Order." The lawyer pressed on. "Do you deny that you once attended therapy for anxiety?" "I don't deny it," she said. "Healing isn't shameful." The lawyer frowned. "So it's possible that what happened at the gala was an emotional misunderstanding?" She interrupted him. "There were 300 witnesses and a video." The lawyer hesitated. "The video is grainy, unclear." Her tone sharpened. "Then listen to the sound. You can't blur screams." The silence that followed was unbreakable. The lawyer looked flustered. "No further questions," he muttered, returning to his seat. The judge called for a recess. As people filed out, Victor finally spoke. His voice was quiet, just enough for her to hear. "You don't belong here," he said flatly. "You're not built for this world." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "I built this world by surviving it." He smirked. "They'll forget you in a month." She replied, "I'll still remember me." He looked away. Outside the courtroom, Daniel waited near the corridor windows. When Elena emerged, he reached for her hand. "You were incredible," he said. She shook her head. "I just told the truth." He smiled faintly. "That's what makes it incredible." Across the hall, reporters swarmed like bees. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched toward her face. "Ms. Marin, do you believe the trial will change anything for other victims?" one shouted. She answered, "Change doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts when people stop looking away." The reporters shouted more questions, but she kept walking. That evening, the trial coverage dominated every channel. Legal analysts dissected every word, debating guilt, motive, and public opinion. In a small apartment downtown, Linda Parker watched the broadcast. She recognized her own trembling voice in the recorded testimony that played on screen. She smiled through tears. In another part of the city, Vanessa Moore watched too. When Elena appeared on the screen, she whispered, "You did what I couldn't." The following day, closing arguments began. The prosecutor's final words rang through the courtroom. "Power protects itself. It buys silence. It builds walls. It writes its own story." But today that story ends. Because the truth doesn't fade. It waits. Victor's lawyer countered with polished words, appeals to doubt and sympathy. But the tide had already turned. The jury left to deliberate. The hours stretched like years. Elena sat with Daniel in the hallway, neither speaking. The walls hummed with whispers and footsteps. Finally, a guard opened the doors. "The jury has reached a verdict." The room filled again. The air felt electric. The judge took her seat. "Has the jury reached a unanimous decision?" A juror stood. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk asked, "How do you find the defendant?" The pause before the answer felt eternal. "Guilty," the juror said. "On all counts." The sound that followed was a mix of gasps, sighs, and the click of 1,000 cameras. Elena didn't move. She sat perfectly still, the weight of the word sinking into her bones. Victor stared straight ahead, his face expressionless. The judge's voice carried through the noise. Sentencing will follow next week. Court is adjourned. Daniel placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. It's over, he said quietly. She whispered, not over, just lighter. They stood together as Victor was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned a deep gold. Crowds gathered behind barriers, cheering, crying, holding signs. Elena stepped onto the courthouse steps, Daniel beside her. The noise swelled like a wave. A reporter called out, "Elena, what will you do now?" She paused, looking at the horizon beyond the flash of cameras. "Live," she said simply. Then she walked forward through the light as the crowd chanted her name, not as a symbol, but as something human. The trial was over. The noise would fade. But her voice, clear and quiet, would remain. A year later, the ballroom at the Rosemont looked nothing like the night of the gala. The chandeliers still hung above, but the light was softer now, tinted blue. Rows of chairs faced a small stage framed by banners with the name of a new foundation, the Hope Initiative. Elena Marin stood near the back of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone on her collar. Her blue dress shimmered faintly under the lights, the same color she had worn the night everything broke. It no longer symbolized pain. Now it meant survival. Daniel approached her from the side of the stage. His hair had gone grayer, his posture slower, but there was a quiet pride in his expression. "It's almost time," he said. Elena smiled softly. "I thought I'd never walk into this place again," he replied. "You're not walking into the past, you're rewriting it." She nodded, taking a deep breath as a voice announced her name. Applause filled the room, loud and sincere. Cameras flashed, but this time they didn't hurt. Elena stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, but she didn't flinch. "Good evening," she began. "1 year ago, this room was filled with fear. Tonight, it's filled with something else. Hope." Her voice was steady, carrying through the hall. "This foundation was born from pain, but it's not about pain anymore. It's about what we do after it. About the people who rise when the world expects them to fall." She looked at her father in the front row. He nodded slightly, eyes glistening. Elena continued, "For too long, silence protected the wrong people. Now, it's our turn to speak, to build something that can't be broken." A hush fell over the crowd. Then came the sound of gentle applause, rising like a wave. When she stepped down from the stage, Daniel met her halfway. "You did it," he said quietly. She smiled. "No, we did." Later that night, the guests mingled beneath the chandeliers. Waiters passed glasses of champagne, the hum of conversation filling the air. Journalists moved discreetly between tables, capturing the moment that had already become part of the city's story. Elena slipped away from the crowd and stepped outside onto the balcony. The city stretched before her, lights glimmering across the river. A cool wind brushed her face. Behind her, Daniel joined her, carrying 2 glasses of water. "No champagne?" she asked. He smiled. "One of us has to stay sober enough to remember the details." She laughed softly. "Old habits." He leaned against the railing. "You know, I keep thinking about that night. I can still hear it sometimes, the music stopping, the crowd holding its breath, but tonight I heard something else." She turned to him. "What's that?" "Peace," he said simply. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise from the ballroom drifted through the doors behind them, soft jazz laughter, the clinking of glasses. Elena looked at the skyline again. "Do you ever think about what happens to him?" Daniel's voice was quiet. "He's serving his sentence. But I don't waste thoughts on men like him anymore." She nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if that's forgiveness. Maybe it's just freedom," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's close enough." Down the hall, a large photograph hung on an easel near the entrance. It showed the moment from her courtroom testimony, captured mid-sentence. Below it, a small plaque read, "The truth doesn't fade, It waits. People stopped to look as they passed, some wiping tears, others smiling quietly. The photo didn't show her pain, it showed her strength. Inside, Vanessa Moore stood near the bar talking to Linda Parker. Both women had helped shape the case, both had risked their lives to tell the truth. Vanessa looked toward the stage where Elena had spoken and said, "She did what all of us wanted to do, she ended it." Linda nodded. "No, she started it." As the evening wound down, Elena stepped outside again. The streets below were slick from rain, reflecting the blue lights that illuminated the building's facade. She walked slowly down the marble steps and stopped at the bottom, where a small crowd of supporters still lingered. A young woman approached her, hesitant. "Ms. Marin," she said. "My sister. She went through something like you did. She watched your interview. It saved her." Elena smiled gently. Then she saved herself. I just reminded her she could. The woman nodded, tears filling her eyes. When Elena turned back toward the building, she noticed how the blue lights wrapped around the columns, the same hue as her dress, the same shade that had once been stained with blood. The light looked softer now, almost alive. Daniel joined her again, hands in his pockets. "You ready to go?" he asked. "Almost," she said. "Just a minute." She took one last look at the building, the place where her silence had ended and her life had begun again. "I used to hate this color," she said quietly. Daniel asked, "And now?" "Now it feels like breathing," she answered. He nodded once. "Let's go home." They walked toward the car together, the noise of the city fading behind them. As they drove away, Elena looked out the window. The reflection of the blue lights flickered across the glass, soft and endless. In the back seat, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a speech she hadn't read tonight. On it, the last line waited, written in her own hand. "Out of pain, we rise." She smiled and slipped it back into her bag. Outside, the sky was clear, the air sharp and cold. Somewhere beyond the towers, the first light of dawn began to rise, a pale blue glow touching the horizon. And for the first time in a long time, Elena didn't look away.